Hi, everybody. My name is Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And welcome to English Digest. And this is our literature unit for the month of June. The novel we're talking about is a novel by Philip K. Dick. I think it came out way back in 1968, as it says in today's lesson. It was first published way back in 1968. And the title of the book is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? It's all about androids in the future, and they have human qualities, and they are hunted by bounty hunters like Rick Deckard. And we pretty much got done summarizing the whole story in our last lesson. If you'd like to hear our summary again, you can probably find the an MP3 of that file somewhere. But today we're actually going to break down the novel and talk about its influence on cyberpunk.
Yeah, I'll admit it. I had to look up cyberpunk. I didn't know what it meant. And I went to Longman Dictionary online thinking, oh, this word might be too new for them, but it's in there. It just says stories about imaginary events relating to computer science. And it's usually set in the future or it's futuristic. So cyberpunk, there's a new word for you.
Indeed. And it's an early example of cyberpunk. And, of course, we've got the novel and the movie that it was based on, or the movie that was based on the novel, I should say. But, again, as I said in our last couple of programs, the movie Blade Runner and the novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep are quite different. So you should probably see them each, or read the one and see the other yourself. But right now we're going to read through the entire contents of our lesson for today, and we'll be right back to talk about it. Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is hailed as an early example of cyberpunk. The novel, first published in 1968, helped to establish the basic characteristics that define the cyberpunk genre, namely a dystopian future and highly sophisticated technology. In a futuristic 1992, people drive hover cars, use video calling and laser guns, and Earth has been destroyed by war. The plot of the novel revolves around Deckard's ability to identify the difference between humans and androids. However, the test he uses is proved not completely reliable. This blurs the line between organic and artificial for Deckard and the readers. This theme of the organic versus the artificial is also seen in the animals present in the story. One of Deckard's most prominent desires throughout the story is to own a real animal. He is ashamed of only owning an electric one. Ironically, robotic animals are so realistic that Deckard is able to convince his neighbors that his sheep is real. Empathy for others is another strong theme in the story. It is the only defining line between humans and androids. However, the human characters in the novel often act in a way that lacks empathy. They are cold and rude to each other. Deckard even betrays his wife by showing romantic interest in an android. On the other hand, the android's desire to flee from being exploited on Mars illustrates that they are capable of emotion. Rachel shows empathy for the other androids when she tries to stop Deckard from killing them. The novel uses conflict between humanity and artificial intelligence to make the readers question what it really means to be human.
Let's get started, guys. Philip K. Dick is the author of our novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And it says here he is hailed as an early example of something called cyberpunk, a type of literature that is kind of popular right now, especially. If someone hails you as being something, it just usually means they're describing something or someone who's done something really good. So I could say the Mona Lisa is hailed as Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece. So yeah, so it's hailed as or is recognized as an achievement here too, recognized as something good, as an early example of cyberpunk. Again, cyberpunk is science fiction that really features a lot of human interaction with supercomputers. Of course, these androids are supercomputers, and they always have kind of a punk feel to them. And the punk in here is just usually people who are rogue or aren't following the rules, or it could even mean something that's kind of worthless. And I think they're looking at these androids as if they have no value whatsoever.
Right. It's a genre of science fiction that describes the future as being kind of hopeless. We've got computers taking over, and the line between humans and robots is blurred. So this is an early example of cyberpunk. The novel and then the movie that was based on the novel is also an early example of cyberpunk. And the novel, first published way back in 1968, helped to establish the basic characteristics that define the cyberpunk genre, namely a dystopian future and highly sophisticated technology. So again, this novel helped to establish the basic characteristics of cyberpunk. If you establish something, you set it up, you set the foundation for something. So basically, this story tells us what those definitions or what those characteristics for cyberpunk are going to be. Namely, or more specifically, those characteristics include a dystopian future and highly sophisticated technology. So dystopian is kind of the opposite of utopian. Utopia is paradise, especially on earth. It's different from heaven. Heaven is where you go if you're religious and you're a good person and stuff like that, and you get to spend eternity with God or whatever.
And you've died. That's an important part.
And utopia, of course, is an ideal society on the earth where everybody gets what they want and everybody's happy and there's no crime, there's no murder and stuff like that. And we have a government that everybody loves, etc., etc. So this is the opposite of a utopian future. This is dystopian, which means there's lots of chaos. The government is just not reliable and everybody's at each other's throats and there's some kind of war going on, radiation. You get the idea.
Yeah, it's pretty dark. I don't really like dystopian movies or novels in particular, but I know that they're popular out there right now, especially. So in a futuristic 1992, remember, he wrote this in 68. So this is what he imagined in his mind. He could see people driving what we're calling hover cars. Hover cars are personal vehicles that fly at an altitude. It's not too high. It's not like a plane, but you're at a few yards or meters above the ground, and you can use these hover cars for personal transportation in the same way a modern car is used. So we often see these in science fiction. I just did a cartoon and they had hover cars in that one. I can't imagine how many more accidents we'd have with hover cars.
Right.
We're bad enough on the road, on the street. So I'm not looking forward to hover cars. He also, in his novel, had video calling, which did not exist in 1968, which was pretty clever of him. Laser guns, we have laser guns. And Earth, of course, had been destroyed by war in his particular novel.
Right. Of course, he did not have smartphones, which, of course, can do video calling pretty easily. Video calling in this movie is just people talking on the phone, and then there's a monitor where you can see the person talking to you on the phone. I guess at the time that was considered highly advanced, but it seems kind of primitive now. And moving on to the next paragraph here, it says, the plot of the novel revolves around Deckard's ability to identify the difference between humans and androids. So the plot, of course, is the general story, what happens in the story, and it revolves around his ability to tell the difference between robots and people. So yeah, that's what the main focus of the plot is. It's always dealing with this idea of his ability to tell the difference between humans and androids. Are you real or are you a robot?
That's interesting. So it says here, however, the test he uses is proved not completely reliable. Yeah, remember Rachel almost passed it, by the way. He's not always sure who's a robot and who's not. I don't think the test is really that accurate. It's not 100%. We know that. So he can't rely on it. If something's reliable, you can count on it to work the way it's supposed to. Or if someone is reliable, you can count on them to do what they said they would do, or to arrive at the time they said they would arrive. Those things are good. Moving on, it says this blurs the line between organic and artificial for Deckard and the readers. We all know what organic is these days because everyone's looking for organic food. They want to, keep those pesticides to a minimum in the foods that they buy and eat. So organic would be real and artificial is fake. It's man-made or human-made. And so when you say something blurs the line, to blur it just means make the difference between these two ideas or subjects less clear. So you can't really see large differences between the two, so it's hard to tell or distinguish between the two of them. So that can blur the line. I think it makes for an interesting conversation, How are we going to treat these up-and-coming androids or robots? They're getting very close to becoming more and more lifelike. They're not there yet, as far as I can tell, but they're getting closer. It's scary.
Yeah, that's a common theme in novels and movies when you blur the line between something and something else. Sometimes they blur the line between what is good and what is evil. We used to be able to tell, that guy's good and that guy's bad. But, now we don't really know. Sometimes that guy's good, but sometimes he's bad. And sometimes the bad guy is good. So kind of blurs the line between good and evil. And in this particular case, it blurs the line between organic and artificial for Deckard and, of course, the readers who are reading the story. I should also mention that if you have problems with your vision, you could say, things look so blurry. I can't see things very clearly. I'm going to need to get glasses here. And, of course, we've got the theme of organic versus the artificial. So if you have something competing against something else, we use the word versus, like we could say, the Yankees versus the Red Sox, or the Americans versus the Japanese in the final of the baseball classic. That's when you describe two things that are competing against each other.
You'll also see this if you're going to law school. You'll also see cases that go to court. If you're going to sue someone or someone's suing you, you'll often see different parties. It'll be the top party versus somebody else. So you're competing against each other. It could be in a game, as Tom said, or a court case. So, there's this theme in the movie about organic or real versus artificial. And you see it in the animals as well, which is really kind of fun too. One of Deckard's most prominent desires throughout the story is to own a real animal. You can see this over and over again. First of all, he wants so badly for his sheep to be real that he lies to his neighbors and says it's a live sheep instead of electric. And then he buys his wife the first bit of real money he gets. He buys his wife a goat, a live animal. It's too bad it's a goat. Goats aren't that great, but it's an animal. It's alive. He so wants something that's alive. And then at the end, he thinks he's found a live frog, and alas, it is not.
Right, and I think he'll probably regret getting that goat for his wife because, real goats poop all over the house and robot ones don't. So maybe he'll change his mind later when he finds out that you don't have to clean up the mess after android sheep or android goats. Okay, that brings us to the midway point in our lesson for today. Let's turn things over now to our very real Chinese teacher.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们前2天带大家看了《银翼杀手》这个小说的情节，重点是，如果真的有了同理心，真的就是人吗？那人跟仿生人到底有什么差别？因为我们会发现奇怪，仿生人好像也有同理心耶，他们几乎都通过心理测验了。我们来看一下这篇小说，记不记得我们前2天有提到，这小说其实在1968年就首次出版了耶。那它的作者是谁呢？作者出现在第一句的地方 Philip K. Dick 这是作者。那这篇小说呢，其实在当时出版的时候就被誉为 cyberpunk 的这种早期范本。 cyberpunk 是什么东西啊？ cyberpunk 其实就是一种小说的题材。那 cyberpunk 主要呢就是一种反乌托邦，表示未来跟尖端科技的这样子的一种小说的题材。好，那我刚刚说的其实都出现在第一段第2句的地方。不过这个第2句啊，感觉好像有点复杂，我们来看一下。首先呢 The novel 逗点之后有一个简化的关系子句，简化的关系子句省略的是 which 跟 was。 这个小说啊，一开始是在1968年所出版的，逗点之后出现了动作 helped， 帮助建立了 the basic characteristics， 基本的一些特色特征。我们请把这3个字画起来 the basic characteristics， 因为后面从 that 到句尾都是限定用法关系子句，告诉我们这个所谓的特色是什么，也就是 cyberpunk 这种题材，它里面到底有怎么样的特色呢？基本上就是反乌托邦式的未来，还有尖端的高科技。当然，当时的小说出版在1968，所以1992对当时的小说来说是一个未来的充满未来感的1992年。那我们现在都已经2023年了嘛，所以对我们来说啊，1992当时不晓得读者们出生了没，好像是很古早的感觉。不过当时的作者你想想看哦，1968年就可以写出这种未来感，驾驶飞行汽车啊，使用视讯通话，还有雷射枪啊之类，真的超强的。那接着我们就来看第二段咯。第二段开始我们就要探讨一下这个小说到底要探讨什么样的 themes， 这个主题是什么。第二段的第一句啊，其实就是人跟仿生人之间到底这个 difference， 这个差别，这个不同到底在哪里呢？因为我们知道后来啊 Rachel 因为几乎通过 Decker 的心理测试，也就是说 Rachel 其实好像是有 empathy 有同理心的耶。也就是说 Decker 所使用的测试其实被证明并不是完全那么可靠哦。在第二段第二句的地方，我们看到一个限定用法关系子句，而且关系词简化，很短的先行词，也就是句子的主词 the test 可以先划线起来。后面的 he uses 我们就左右括号啦。那前面的 which 或者是 that 关代就省略。关代什么时候可以省略啊？关代如果在括号自己的关系子句当中当受词的时候就可以省略。我怎么知道他是不是当受词？你看这括号里面啊 he uses the test， 他使用这个测试，这个测试不就是那个which或 that 吗？所以当成 uses 的受词就可以省略掉。这是第一个主题。那第二个主题呢，就是有机跟人工对立的这样的主题。那有机跟人工对立的主题就出现在第二段第4句哦，前面一点的地方 the organic versus the artificial。 不过在这一句话当中还要特别注意一下，它也有一个限定用法关系子句的简化，先行词是 the animals， 这些动物哪些呢？也就是在故事当中出现的动物，从 present 一直到 story 可以左右括号，关系词的 which 或者是 that 跟 be 动词做了一个省略，在这里的 present 是形容词，就是出现的意思。那 Decker 其实他在故事当中一直表现出一个很重要的愿望，就是他希望能拥有一只真正的动物，然后以至于呢他都骗他的邻居说哦，我们家那个羊啊是真的，他为了他只有一只电子动物这件事情感到很羞愧。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. It's our final day 3 of our literature unit, and we're talking about Philip K. Dick's book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? When we left you, we were telling you about some of the ideas in this book and some of the themes, I guess you could say. His book really was hailed as an early example of cyberpunk, where they're using science fiction and there's a lot of human interaction with supercomputers, or as we like to call them nowadays, just robots or androids. And usually it's set in a situation where life is pretty depressing, I would say. Mm-hmm. A lot of the places are very dystopian, very much where life is difficult or unfair, or there's not a lot of enforcement of the law, and so people are just running around wild. our planet has already been destroyed. Remember, there's no clean air on Earth anymore, and they're trying to get people to go to Mars. So the plot of this novel, though, our author says, revolves around or centers around Deckard's ability to even tell the difference between humans and androids. And this book blurs the line between them. Also, there's this theme that the organic versus artificial is also very clearly displayed in animals, and we come to know that Deckard really, really hungers after a real animal, a live one.
Yeah, my question is, why can't he settle for a cat or a dog? I guess they've gone extinct or something, and only sheep and goats are left. But again, he is ashamed of only owning an electric one. If you're ashamed, you feel bad about something and you feel embarrassed around other people. So indeed, you might be ashamed of working a job that only pays you 30,000 NT dollars a month or something, and you're already 40 years old and you don't have a girlfriend. You could be quite ashamed of that. And he's ashamed of not owning a real animal. Ironically, robotic animals are so realistic that Deckard is able to convince his neighbors that his sheep is real. So it's ironic here, the opposite as you would expect. Robotic animals are realistic. They're so realistic that he can fool his neighbors into thinking that his sheep is real. If something's realistic, it looks like it's actually very real. You can describe a person as being realistic or a dreamer or something like that. You're not being very realistic about your future. You think you can be a rock and roll star, but actually I think you should be just an accountant. That's up your alley.
Yeah, you'll often hear people try to destroy others' dreams by saying, hey, you're not being realistic. Sometimes I'll set goals that aren't very realistic. Maybe the time to accomplish or achieve them is too short. So sometimes that's not being realistic. So yeah, here these robotic animals are so realistic that he's able to convince his neighbors that his sheep is real. If you convince someone something, you talk them into believing what you want them to believe. I wanted to mention, ironically, is it's kind of difficult to explain in, at least in Chinese it is. But like Tom said, we use it when we're talking about a situation where the opposite of what you expect to happen or to be true is actually true. So, for example, I could say, ironically, my cold got better on the last day of my holiday. So I was sick the whole time. And then on the last day, oh, I feel fine. Yay, my vacation's over, though. So, yeah, it's something that just represents the opposite of what you expected to happen or to be true. So, yeah, you would... Ironically, they're so realistic that even his neighbors believe the animals are real. The sheep, at least. He had an electric sheep.
Right, so maybe he should be satisfied with that because people believe it's real and that should be good enough. Now, moving on now to the final paragraph, it says, empathy for others is another strong theme in the story. Remember, we did talk about the word empathy before.
Yeah.
That just means you have feelings for others and you try to feel the way that they're feeling. And so, indeed, the robots originally did not have empathy for other people. They were cold-blooded killers. Or maybe they were. They didn't really have empathy for other people. But later on in the story, it turns out that they're starting to have that empathy for other people. The example was Rachel. She started to have empathy for other people, and she almost passed Deckard's empathy test.
She sure did. However, it says the human characters in the novel often act in a way that lacks empathy. So there you go. That's kind of ironic right there because you would expect the androids to lack empathy, but the humans not to be so cold. The humans are cold and rude to each other. Deckard even betrays his wife, remember? By showing romantic interest in an artificial person, an android of robot. On the other hand, the android's desire to flee from being exploited on Mars illustrates that they are capable of emotion. No one wants to be a slave. anywhere, whether you're a human or an android, a robot, no one wants to be a slave. And you can see why the androids were trying to get away from Mars, because that's all they were there. They had no personal life. They were just an assistant, a slave to a human being. And so you could see from that they were showing emotion because they were getting out of there to see if they could find some happiness on their own. To exploit is one of our vocabulary words. It means you use a situation or a person in a way that's very unfair or even selfish. So, yeah, they were definitely being exploited on Mars by the humans there.
Yep, just because they're robots, that means we can use them for labor. They never get breaks. They never get a sleep or things like that. They have to work out in the cold, in the poisonous atmosphere of Mars. And this illustrates that they are capable of emotion because they want to flee. They want to get away from Mars and head back to Earth. And Rachel shows empathy for the other androids when she tries to stop Deckard from killing them. So there's some kind of unity there. They're sticking up for each other.
Yeah.
She tries to protect those other androids. She does not want the human Deckard to kill them. And the novel uses conflict between humanity and artificial intelligence to make the readers question what it really means to be human. And that kind of brings it up to the modern times because nowadays, of course, everybody's talking about AI, artificial intelligence. Is it going to take over? Are we going to lose our jobs because of it? Are the robots going to take over and make slaves of us all? So that's the conflict between humanity and AI. Artificial intelligence. Intelligence, of course, is when you're smart or when you're able to think of your own ideas without being told them. And, of course, the adjective is intelligent. Oh, you are a very intelligent young man.
Well, someone who is very intelligent is our Chinese teacher. So let's turn over some time right now.
不过很有讽刺意味的是，他欺骗他的邻居，可是邻居也觉得他的羊是真的耶。也就是说，其实机器动物是很逼真的。这就是为什么 Deckard 能够说服他的邻居相信他的电子羊是真羊。同样在第二段第7句这个地方也有 so that 的关系子句，如此的以至于表结果的这个句型，我们要把它抓出来。那接下来我们就要谈到另外一个主题，第3个主题就是 empathy 这个事情很重要的这个所谓的同理心。因为同理心出现在第3段第1句哦，它其实是唯一能够定义人跟 Android 仿生人之间的一个界限。可是在小说当中，人类的这个行为往往都缺乏 empathy。他们是彼此之间是非常冷漠无理的，甚至第5句 Deckard 还背叛了他的妻子，然后呢对 Rachel 表示这种很浪漫的一种兴趣。但是另外一方面，仿生人反而想要逃离火星上被剥削，就表示他们其实是有 empathy， 甚至 Rachel 还想要试图阻止 Deckard 杀死其他的仿生人。所以我们看到这样的对比对照，关键就在第3段第6句On the other hand 这个地方可以框起来。On the other hand 的前面讲到的是人类应该要有 empathy， 但是却没有。另外一方面 Android 不应该会有 empathy， 可是却表现出来了。所以其实我们大家也可以想想看，到底我们为什么要作为人呢？我们作为人真正的意义是什么呢？第3段的第8句最后面The readers 我们可以 question 想想看 what it really means to be human 我们作为人真正的意义在哪里呢？以上是今天的内容，我是安娜，我们下次见。
That's it for today, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this month's featured novel. Do androids dream of electric sheep, or at least our discussion of this particular novel? And we encourage you to read it yourself or learn more about cyberpunk because it has become quite popular in recent years. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
And I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
See you next time.